We're holding in Sha'ar Gimel of the Nefesh HaHaim, and this evening we're beginning Perek Beis, and he's addressing what is the meaning of referring to Hashem as Mekoimo Shel Olam. We refer to Hashem as Hamakom Yinachem, and there's drushes Chazal that Makom iti besela, and so he began in the first chapter to tell us a little bit about it and that there's a lot of depth to it. And he'd made a comparison, the way space, he didn't think of space the same way we think of space, but he has the concept that makom is the space, like sort of a three-dimensional, we could give coordinates for a particular space, and that space can hold some content. And the space is different than the content. And so we're using a comparison. Hashem is mekoimo shel olam. The ein ha'olam mekoimo, elohu mekoimo shel olam. Good evening, Jay Popko, welcome.
Good evening.
We're just getting underway here. I'm ready to begin the text. Omnam pnimius inyan mekoimo shel olam. The true inner depth of this idea, mekoimo shel olam, that God is the place of the world, hu inyan gadol me'od. There's a lot of depth here. Ki ma shekinuhu yizbarach shmo mekoimo shel olam. They refer to God as being the place of the world. Ein erech klal le'inyan makom hanoise kol chefetz ha'omed alav sha'atzmus hishavus v'kiyum akli yesh lemetzius b'fnei atzma. So now the Nefesh HaHaim wants to draw a distinction that a place, again, I think of a kli as being something that sits on a table. I think of a kli as like a vase or a bowl or a plate. Those are kelim. And so a spoon or a fork is a kli, and it has to be somewhere. It can't be nowhere. It has to be somewhere, and that somewhere is mekoimo. It's the place of the kli. But the existence of the kli is not really dependent on the makom, because the chefetz ha'omed alav atzmus hishavus v'kiyum akli. The essential existence of the vessel and the fact that it's sustained in time is separate and independent from the place that it occupies at any given moment. Okay? But that's not true of God's relationship to the universe. Okay? Hamakom rak matzelet ota shelo tipol v'tishaver. The makom, again, I think of a place on a table, is holding the kli right now. So let's make it a glass kli so it could break if it falls. So the glass is a kli, and it's sitting on the table. But the glass would exist even if the table did not exist. It might fall and break, but certainly, when the glass blower created the glass, he didn't need a table to do so. V'chein inyan chiyus v'kiyum haguf al yedei haneshama. Another metaphor that was used here was the relationship between the soul and the body. But even if you remove the soul from the body still exists. Haguf yesh lo metzius bifnei atzmo. A dead body, the soul has been removed and it will decompose, but meanwhile the body is still extant, distinct and independent from the presence of the soul. Ve'eno mizbatel memetziuso gam betzet haneshama mimenu. Okay, so we have two physical examples of the relationship between a place and a thing. We have the relationship between the soul and the body. And in those paradigms, you have the thing that exists separate from its source, separate than the makom and neshama.
I thought we said last week that the neshama gives the chiyut to the body.
That's right.
If the neshama is gone, then
the body's dead.
Body dead, yeah.
But it still exists.
And a dead body is not the same thing as a live person.
True, not the same as a live person, but it is a thing. A dead body
immediately begins to degenerate. Yes,
it still takes place. It still takes up space. Physics-wise, it takes up space
until it degenerates and turns into a dust.
It has a makom, a diminishing makom, but nevertheless a makom.
Also, I would argue that even an inanimate object, there are certain environments where the inanimate object cannot exist in. So, you know, so I
Yes,
don't know if that analogy is 100%.
the center. Again,
So it's not totally independent of the environment,
true. There's
you know,
interaction. If you put an ice cube in an oven, so something will happen. It'll turn into liquid, and then it'll turn into a gas, and so forth. So for sure, there's
no
interaction
longer be
between.
nice.
That's right. There's definitely interaction between them. Good evening, Steve. Welcome. Nice to see you. So again, but we're comparing. We have three things here. We have the soul and the body. We have a place and a vessel. But we also want to talk about Hashem is mekoimo shel oilam. And so now he says, Aval ha'oilamois kulam kol ikar hishavus mitziusam kol rega hu rak me'ito yitbarach shmo. This is totally different because the existence of the universe, which is of course everything in it, including people and including vessels, but we're talking about God as mekoimo shel oilam, so we're speaking about Hashem and the oilam, okay, which is everything, the universe in its broadest definition. It only exists at any given time as the hidgashmut, the coming into being of the will of God. Okay, call ikar hishavus mitziusam. Their very existence, their very being at kol rega v'rega is only from Hashem and His will. Ve'ilu haya misalik ritzoino yizbarach milihavois oisam kol rega hayu le'ein ve'efes mamish. If Hashem would withdraw His will to sustain existence for even a moment, everything in the universe, anything and everything in the universe would be a complete and total zero, nothingness. It would be ein, aleph yud nun, nothingness. Hashem created the world yesh mi ayin, and if He at any moment wasn't infusing His will to keep it in existence, it would be choizer le'efes ve'ayin mamish. Okay, very, very central idea of the Nefesh HaHaim, that the world is constantly being recreated every moment through God's willing it into existence. And that's unique. That's unique relationship between Hashem and everything else that exists. A table does not give constant existence to a glass on it, and the neshama does not give constant existence to the body. The body exists to a degree independently from the neshama. Whereas the world, the existence of everything, the oilamos, the universe, does not actually truly have independent existence from Hashem. Rather, it is through His will, every moment, that He is constantly maintaining the existence of the universe. And that's a big deal. Rach machmas she'ein bekoyach shum nivra, af elyon be'elyonim lahasig mahuta inyan, eich kol ha'olamois v'kol tzva'am hema be'etzem ayin. We can't really understand this. We can't really appreciate the nothingness of everything. Even the angels, he said, can't really fathom that. V'rak kol rega hema mishavin lemetzius mimenu yizbarach. We have to relate to everything as if it does exist and it exists. And so even though Hashem is constantly willing it into existence, but we can perceive it as a reality, and we must, and we're obligated to. And he's going to emphasize that point, that these could be dangerous ideas if we decide, oh, the world doesn't really exist. And so if things don't really exist, so then Chazer is not really Chazer, and we could get into all sorts of trouble philosophically, and then halacha l'maisa. So you don't want to say that everything doesn't really exist. That's a dangerous idea. And he's going to talk about that, and that he wants to be careful with these ideas, but he is introducing them.
It's not that novel to me, what he says, because, we understand that every blade of grass has a malach that's telling it to grow.
True.
And if that malach wasn't doing it, it wouldn't grow. It wouldn't exist probably.
Well, you have a very deep religious, outlook for starters. Then, Jay, I must say.
I'm just quoting what it says.
Yeah, I'm afraid to walk on my lawn. Yeah.
But just think about, from we live in the physical world and it's so real to us. And if you bump into something, you stub your toe, and rocks are hard. And so to say that it all doesn't exist independently and it's constantly being brought into existence at every moment, that is a pretty big chiddush. That's a pretty big idea. Anyway,
Is this
that's about. Yes.
this is like it's Ki'ilu like Hashem is minapeach. He's constantly fueling the creation that's already existing and is mitchadesh. Is that like the kind of opposite of tzimtzum, where he's like limiting, or am I talking about two very different, distinct things?
I decided, Shimon, I'm going to wait for the Nefesh HaHaim to talk about the term tzimtzum, and then I'm going to have a good introduction to it from Rabbi Kaplan. He defines it pretty well in his introduction to the Sefer HaBahir. So I'm going to put off questions about tzimtzum until we get to it in the text. Okay.
Okay. Because my only knowledge of it is really from studying the Ramchal, so I don't know what Nefesh HaHaim's take.
We're going to spend a lot of time on it, and there's a big machlokes about it, and we'll talk about the version of the Balatanya versus the Nefesh HaHaim. But I'm going to wait till he gets to it in the text.
Okay, no.
Will he be talking about Mekomo Shel Olam further, or he's pretty much done with that?
No, we're in the middle of this discussion.
Okay, because I never really understood, Baruch Kavod Hashem Imkomo, what that means. Mikomo hu yifem barachamav. What does that mean? All those things. We'll get to that.
Yeah, I think we will see more about that. So meanwhile, he's talking about the no being, even the highest beings, the Elyon Shebel Yoinim, can really be masig, can really fathom the essence of how this works, of how the oilamos and everything in them really are ayin. V'rak kol rega hema mishavin l'metzius mimenu yizbarach. Lezot bachru lahamshileu yitbarach. Ulahazbir laozen shomat b'kerev chachamim b'tevas makom. That's why they choose to use this word makom, because it's giving the capacity to exist to everything that exists. He has now a remez from a pasuk in Eov. And I actually want to make a correction of something that I said earlier. The Hagos in the Sefer are from Reb Chaim himself, from Chaim Volozhiner. The very first one in the Sefer is by his son Reb Yitzhak, but the rest of them, he weaves them into the text, putting these glosses here. So this is from the author of the Nefesh HaHaim. He says, Derek Drash nuchal lahamis bepsuke Eov ve'achochma me'ayin timtza. Let's see how the dots go on that. Ve'achochma me'ayin timatzeh. Yeah. Ve'eze makom bina. Okay, so this is a great pasuk. It has the word ayin in it, and it has makom in it. Where can wisdom be found? Where is the source of understanding? So, again, you could read it in a quite simple way, like where can wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? But remember, we can look at this word ayin. May ayin could be like from where, but we're gonna be medayik it as the word ayin, like meaning ephes, ein, nothingness. So then Chochmah comes from nothingness. So let's see how the Nefesh HaHaim explains it himself. Ve'achochmah me'ayin timatzeh. She'achochmah hagedoila al kol chochmah hamuseget me'ito yitbarach. The greatest wisdom in understanding something about God, hu hachochmah hanifla'ah she'me'ayin timatzeh kol rega mitziut. That at every moment, everything that exists is being brought into existence from nothingness, from ayin. Ve'eze makom bina, hainu she'ein b'metziut, eze sechel, shenuchal lechanot she'asechel ahu, hu makom muchshar shetachul alav bina, lahavin koach hanifla hazeh. V'siyem hu yada et mekoma. Let's see if that's there. Lo yada enosh erka, V'lo simatzeh be'eretz hachayim, Tehom amar lo bihi, B'yam amar ein imadi, lo yutan skor tachtea velo yishakel kesef mechira lo tisule beketem ofir beshoam yakar v'sapir lo yarchena zahav uzchuchit utmurata klipaz. Gold or glass cannot match its value, nor vessels of fine gold be exchanged for it. Ramod v'gavish lo yizacher umeshech chochma mipninim. Coral and crystal cannot be mentioned with it. A pouch of wisdom is better than rubies. Lo yarchena pitidat kush beketim tahor lo tisule. Topaz from Nubia cannot match its value. Pure gold cannot be weighed against it. V'chochma me'ayin tavo ve'ezem makom bina. I'm trying to think, see if it ends the way he says. Okay, yes. It goes on and on and on, that there's nothing that's comparable to it. It's hidden from the eyes of all living. Ne'lama me'ene kol chai u'me'ofa shamayim nistera. It's hidden from the eyes of all living, concealed from the fowl of heaven. Avadon v'mavet amru boznenu shamanu shim'a. Abaddon and death say, we have only a report of it. Elohim hevin darka. V'hu yada et mikoma. God understands the way to it. He knows its source. Ki hu liktzot haaretz yabit tachat kol hashamayim yir'eh. Lasot l'ruach mishkal u'mayim tikein b'midah. Vasoto l'matar chok v'derech laziz kolot. Az ra'av yisapra hachina v'gam chakra. V'yoymer la'adam hein yirat Adonai hi chokma v'sur meira bina. So what happened? Okay, here, this is, I guess, the thing. Elohim hevin darka v'hu yada et mikoma. That's the pasuk that he's talking about. That no one can really fathom it, and it can't be compared to rubies or precious gems. Only God understands it. He knows its makom, the makom of this wisdom. And what the wisdom is that we're talking about is the wisdom of how the world that we perceive, which is so real and so physical, and even the spiritual aspects of the world, but everything that we know and everything we've ever experienced, is its existence is constantly and fundamentally dependent on an influx of energy from Hashem, calling it into existence at every moment. And how that works, or how that could be, is this hidden wisdom that no one can know, and only Hashem, v'siyam hu yada et mikoma. So this idea of Hashem being mikoimo shel olam is, in a sense, a sod. It's a secret, something not entirely knowable to our perception, something that only Hashem really knows.
I don't know. I would say it would support it if it says the hu mikoma. Hu yada mikoma implies it's something outside of Hashem. And even the psukim say that later, and defining, what is chachma and what is bina. So we're talking about, these are certain qualities that humans should aspire to. Chachma and bina.
I actually have a nice answer for you, Jay. I like your diuk, that hu yada et makoma, but I want to remind you of a Rambam in the beginning of the Yesodei HaTorah, where the Rambam is talking basically Jewish philosophy and about knowing about God and believing in God and understanding how different God is than everything else that exists. And he talks about Hashem's da'as, and the wisdom of God, or God's knowledge. And he says, hu v'da'ato echad. Okay, hu dato v'chiyuto echad. God's knowledge and his being, his living being, and himself are all one. And he says, okay, we don't really have the power we can't understand God, obviously. But my point is that this word yediyah is something that shares a certain unity with God himself. So hu yadat makoma is another way of saying, at least according to the Rambam, hu mikoma shel olam. That's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah, except that at the end of that section,
yes,
in EO, he defines, what is chachma and what is bina. Okay. He's not saying it's Hashem. Hashem is chachma, Hashem is bina.
No,
It's
they're right.
instructing us. It's instructing us as to, how we can attain these qualities.
Yeah. Chokhmah and Bina are for sure, separate things. And you know that Chokhmah and Bina are two names of the top spheres, Chokhmah and then Bina. And Das is, a union of the two of them. So yeah, there's a lot to this.
Also, maybe like we're drawing on that, in the Sphirot, we're drawing on that source.
Good.
Well,
For
they're
our
tying it in
Chokhmah
with.
and
Sorry, Jay.
Go ahead, Steve.
Seems like one of the things they're talking around is like an intense awareness of the awesomeness of God to the point where you nullify yourself or your ego, whatever you want to call it. So
Mm.
Okay.
it doesn't take that much. I mean,
Well, I mean, it doesn't take that much to recognize our limitations and to
we
nullify our
try to
For
ego.
hold
some
on
people,
to it.
Steve,
No. I mean, like what they say about Rashis Chachma.
Good.
yeah.
Beishis
Okay,
Chokhmah Yiras Hashem.
got you on that one, Jay. Thank you.
All right.
But Steve, let me follow up on that and say what the Nefesh HaHaim said, that not even the Elyonim Sheb Elyonim, because like you just said, nullify the ego, okay, or like turn yourself into ayin. Let me share something with you. The word ayin, Aleph Yud Nun, is the same letters as the word ani, Aleph Nun Yud. And that's an incredible thing, that I, the great me, ani, am really ayin. Aleph Yud Nun. And that takes a lifetime of work to realize that Ani Ayin. Ich bin garnished. I'm
Yeah.
really nothing.
The old joke, who you to call yourself a nothing,
Exactly. So that's a tremendous job to move the Yud from the end of Ani to the middle and turn yourself into nothingness. And that's where you begin to get wisdom. Chokhmah me'ayin timatzeh. If you get to ayin, if you're able to nullify your ego, then you can begin to understand some of the divine wisdom. But nothing can totally nullify itself. Nothing can really reach ayin, because everything that Hashem created is yesh. He created yesh me'ayin. And so even the malachim, who don't have a body, but they have a spiritual essence, but they have some sort of yesh. So inasmuch as they can't entirely nullify themselves, therefore they can't grasp the ultimate depth of the divine wisdom of how Hashem brings everything from ayin into yesh, that he's mekoimo shel olam. It's an unknowable sort of paradox of how everything is really ayin, but it's being constantly turned into yesh through this divine creative process. Okay.
No wonder Hashem used the word anochi in the Aseret Dibrot, because he's not an ayin. He's not ayin. He's yesh. But I thought it's interesting. I don't know if it has any significance that Eov used yada. He used the past tense, although it's translated here as present tense, but he knows its place. But it actually siyem b'hu yada.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's.
I'm going to say on that, Shimon,
Poetic.
that here it is. V'hu yada et mekoma. The Radak says in a bunch of places that we find a certain amount of fluidity of tenses.
In the tenses,
in the Navi.
Right. We did discuss that.
And he sometimes explains philosophically, because even things that are going to happen in the future, to Hashem, it's as if they already happened, because he's Hoya Hoya V'Yiyah, he's above all time. And so there's a certain amount of, you could play a little bit loose with verb tenses. So Hashem yada et mikoma, he knew that like before it even existed, and always. I'm just throwing that idea in. Let's see what it says here in the Rashi on it. Sheyodeyahu. So Rashi puts it into present tense, interestingly, right? Sheyodeyahu heichan shoreh v'gam yishabchua v'yomru la ki Elohim hevin darka. Nistakel ba ubara et haolam. What a rich Rashi. Rashi says this chokhmah that we're talking about is what Hashem used to create the world, and it's a reference to the oisios of the Aleph base. Okay, Elokim hevin darka nistakel ba ubara et haolam beotioteha kisidram umishkalam yatzar kol hayitzurim kasher katuv besod sefer Yetzira. Wow, what a Rashi! I wonder if it's really Rashi. I question whether Rashi really wrote reference Sefer Yetzira in his commentary.
Wasn't it gone before him?
The Sefer Yetzira is, an ancient Kabbalistic text, which was out there before the Zohar had come to light. So the Zohar was a big secret. Remember, Rashi's life is 1040 to 1105. It is possible Rashi saw the Sefer Yetzira. It would be in manuscript form at that time, but he could have seen it. It's funny that he, I don't think there's a Rashi in Chumash.
Yeah, it's not like Rashi's, to quote Sefer Yetzirah.
Yeah, right. I'm trying to think. Whatever. Anyway, it's a fascinating Rashi that he's talking about the process of creation, and of course, the process for creation for us is not, a scientific formula, but it's the permutation of the letters of the alphabet. Of the Aleph base that Hashem uses, the oisios. He's mistakel ba. He's looking into the Torah. We say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu istakel be'oraisa ubara alma. He looked into the Torah and created the world. And this creative process is like the process of speech. He's using letters and forming words and permutations of words, and thereby he spoke and brought things into being. And in a sense, that's constantly going on. Hashem is constantly recreating the world, B'kol Yom B'tuvo, Maaseh Bereshis, and it has to do with the letters, and that's why the davening, and we saw this in Sha'ar base. That's why davening, and we're going to see more in Sha'ar Daled, learning Torah is so powerful, because when we say the words, we use the letters of the Aleph base. We're tapping into the creative energy that Hashem used and uses to constantly bring the world into existence. So when we say Matoivu Alecha Yaakov or Shema Yisrael or Bereshis Bara, whatever psukim we say, every letter that comes out of our mouth and its fusion between our soul and our body and our breath, that's giving creative energy to the Torah that Hashem used. The Torah, it's the means through which he created everything that exists. So there's a real lot of creative power and energy in this stuff. So that's really exciting.
I kind of like Stu's analogy, regarding, an input of external energy to keep things going. I mean, I'm not a physicist, but, familiar with the concept of entropy, and things basically without the input of energy, things will just fall apart.
Break apart.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll have just randomness. You'll have nothing really. You'll have
the whole universe is doing that.
Tohu vavohu. That's what you would have. You'd have tohu vavohu.
Mamash. And so Hashem is constantly putting into it. He's yoitzer and he's boira. Good. So we're going on. Sha'af shekach gazra hakmasu yizbarach litein mitziuso le'olamoi ba'oifen shil'e kol sechel lahasig eichu hamshachas ha'ishavu samimenu yizbarach shmo kol rega v'yuchal lidamot be'enei basar sha'olam hu mitzius v'kiyum b'fnei atzmo chas v'shalom. So it was Hashem's wisdom that he gave enough of an apparently independent existence to the world that when the scientists examine it, and when you look at it with a casual view, the world seems to exist. And although he's constantly bringing it into existence every moment, but it's easily can be thought in the mind's eye that the world has its own independent mitzius. And he says about that, chas v'shalom, to think that the world has an independent mitzius. That would be, it would be like shtei reshuyos, or it'd be like avodah zara. It's just not true. The world doesn't exist except for Ritzono Yisbarach, hu mekoimo shel olam. He's constantly creating the world and bringing it into existence.
So it's not self-sustaining.
Not at all.
And the belief of, that God created the world and just kind of set everything in motion and then
Totally not.
withdrew is not the case.
Exactly. Hey, iru chazal ene asechel behamshilam le'inyan makom. So Chazal revealed to us that that's not the way it is by using this word makom, shekemo shehakli, ha'omedet al eze makom. So I talked about a glass on the table, like a vessel on a certain place. Hagam shehakli, hare yesh la be'emes mitzius b'fnei atzma. The glass exists independently from the table. Im kol zeh, im lo haya le'akli makom sheta'amod alav, hayta kilo haya. If there was no place for the glass couldn't exist. Okay, so to Hashem mekoimel shel oilam, without Hashem, there would be no oilam. Okay, there's another gloss here. Here we go.
Isn't he contradicting himself now? He said that the glass can exist, without without the table. And even a body can exist without the neshama.
Yes,
now he's saying that's not the case.
I don't think it's the table. Isn't it the glass itself?
No, the glass is a vessel, a kli, and it needs a makom. So I'm saying the table is the makom in which the glass exists.
Oh, I'm thinking the makom is the space in the dimension that it takes up.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. So that makes sense. So it doesn't have to be a particular space. It just needs its space. Without its space, it can't exist.
Yes. And that's the idea here. He made distinctions between the body and the vessel versus Hashem is Mekom Shel Olam, but he is showing that the basic idea is that every kli, everything that exists has to have a space. And without a space it can't exist. That's the bottom line. Hagagam himshiluhu yitbarach bevchinat makom, another aspect of why it's called makom. Shekemo shehamakom al yado mitkayem akli, af im eno shaveh be'erech im hakli. Think how different space is than the vessel that occupies it. They're very different. Gam hamakom af im al yado mitkaymim kama v'kama kelim shonim zeh mizeh. So think about space. Again, I use the tabletop, and you have a glass on it, and you have a knife on it, and you have a loaf of bread on it. And those are three very different things. And yet the space holds all of them, okay? Because the space is qualitatively different than its contents. Ein gormim al yedei zeh shum shinui be'amakom. But the makom itself is unaffected by whether it's holding a knife, a bread, or a glass. Hamakom mekayim v'soivel kulam b'hashva'a achat. And yet the relationship between the place, the space, and the stuff is the same. There's content and there's space. Kachu yizbarach shmo mekayim kol oilamois. So too HaKadosh Baruch Hu is maintaining all different types of worlds. Av she'ein erech klal beino yizbarach u'beineihem. Even though the worlds are so different than Hashem, like space is different than contents, than stuff.
And also different between each other, right?
And different from one, yes, and the oilamos are different from one another, and yet Hashem is containing all of them, as it were. Ta'af kuli alma uchma iu legabe the ein sof v'gamim ki nira lanu shinuyim shoynim mitzad abriya madrego shoyna zumizu. Remember that there's, besides all the world of good, there's the world of evil and the world of defilement. Even the fact that evil exists and all the dark side that exists, it doesn't exist anywhere outside of God because there's no such thing. Hashem mekoimel shel oilam, even the bad stuff. Im kol zeh leis bei shinoi yizbarach shmo, the ihu lo ishtani. Remember, God is unchanging. He's perfect and unchanging. Umitzido yitbarach hu mekayamam bedimyon makom. So how should we understand the existence of evil to Hashem's existence? So he's proposing here, again, it's a hard philosophical question, but he's giving us an outline here. The way that space contains lots of different things, and even though those things are very different than one another, and they're different from space, but space can still contain them. So too Hashem is totally different from the things that he created that take up space, that that exist, the different oilamos, and even the world of evil or the existence of evil. But Hashem is maintaining everything that exists. Ve'im ki davar ze ein b'shum seichel lahasig eich umahu uma v'hu pilai. This is wondrous and beyond our full capacity to fathom. Lezeh himlitzu chazal hinei makom iti. Hashem said those words, Hinei makom iti, atrai, and so this is like, I think Zohar, atrai tfeila li, perish, shaleis machshava tvisa, my place, this is Aramaic, my place is tafel, is subservient to me, meaning no thought can really grasp this. Eichu bebchinas makom beli shinui, how Hashem bebchinas makom is totally unchanging. Raku Yizbarach Levado, Hamasig Atzmuso, Hashem who understands himself, Masig Eichu Mekoiman, the Kulu Almin Beli Shinoi. Hashem understands how it is that he contains everything that exists, all the different oilamos. Ke'inyin V'hu Yada Et Mekoma. Again, returning to that pasuk that we saw in Eov, that Hashem always knew, even before the Bria and even after the Bria. Hashem is constant and unchanging, and although he created a vast system of worlds, and they're all different from one another, and they're totally different from him, and yet he understands how he can contain them all. V'zehu iti, that's called makom iti daika. Ke'inyin, he concludes with words, liba lepuma logalia. These words are Aramaic for from the heart does not reveal it to the mouth, which is an expression here that means, again, that Hashem Kaviyachol, he understands how this all works, how he's containing everything that exists, even though it's all so different from him and so different from one another. But even that can't be put into words. God himself doesn't reveal it from his heart, as it were, to his mouth. Liba lepuma logalia. So it's such an esoteric idea that even the heart doesn't reveal it to the mouth, meaning there's no way to capture it in words.
Okay? With this discussion about, the Kalim and Makom, if you don't follow this carefully and keep it straight in your head, you start to, you can accidentally, your mind can veer towards the double yellow line of Ein lo demut haguf, and you end up in the Shulayim. It's like we're talking about these forms. He has no form. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you don't keep these thoughts correctly, if you're uninitiated, you could kind of veer off and start thinking there is a demut.
Yeah, you have to be really careful with these ideas. He's going to speak more words of caution about this, and that he only dared to write all this stuff because he felt it was important, and really because the Balatanya was writing about it, and he felt the Chassidim were, not getting it all exactly right, or there was some zilzul in it. So you're right, Shimon, you have to be really careful with these ideas and not fall into the gutter of thinking that God has a body, or that he takes up space, he is space. None of those things are true. God is totally unknowable, and he's totally different than anything we know. And we're talking about why Chazal use this word makom, space or place, for Hashem, and some of the meaning in that. But he has emphasized that we can't truly grasp it. And only Hashem could really grasp this. And the last words he said was that even the heart or the mind does not reveal it to the mouth. Okay. And that's referring to the divine. So this is on a very, very, very pristine level of mind. And so, yeah, it's not a place for the uninitiated. You have to be.
Like when you say Hashem is omnipresent, it's almost like a disservice.
That he's everywhere?
Yeah, but it's like, to me, based on it, it's almost like a limitation. It's like greater than that.
For sure.
Oh, I wish we had a physicist here tonight.
Why is that, Jay? What do you want?
Make them, yeah, interesting stuff. I mean, thinking about, the universe and is it limitless?
But what will that help you?
I'm just thinking, let's say, Hashem encompasses the entire existence, which is the universe, essentially.
Okay.
So does that imply that there's some limit to the universe?
The universe, whether it's finite or infinite, and there have been two opinions in modern science, right? And this has to do with Einstein and his mistake, what he called his greatest blunder in the 20s, when he put in a certain factor, but
the fudge factor, yeah.
The fudge factor, yes. But Hashem is mekoimo shel olam, whether the olam is finite or infinite. Hashem is for sure infinite, and even infinite is not a good word for God. He's totally otherly, and we can't. And Shimon, you said the word omnipresent. The Rambam has a beautiful philosophical statement that you can't say anything positive about God.
Because it's limiting.
He is big, he is great, he's nice, he's loving. All those things are inappropriate because he's none of those things and all of those things, and he's just beyond our fathoming.
So unlimited.
Yes. And the Kabbalah, in my opinion, does a good job of this. Of we're going to see, we have Shemos, we're going to talk about Havaya and Elohim, and we're going to talk about Or Ein Sof, but there's a certain place where our description of Atzmuso Yizbarach, God's essence, and about it we say nothing, because we can't say anything about it. We can't know anything about it. It's totally unknowable.
I always think the Shema are just attributes for our purposes.
Yafeh. So you're understanding that there's stuff out there that God is unknowable. And so we use Shemos. He revealed Shemos. God revealed himself by creating the world. He revealed himself again by giving us the Torah. The Eser Makois, Kriyas Yamsuf, God revealed himself to mankind. So we have reshus to talk about him and to talk to him because he talked to us and interacted with us. But his essence, entirely unknowable. We can say nothing about it. And so everything that we are talking about, and we're saying a lot of stuff here, and we're talking about why Chazal used the word, makom regarding Hashem, and he's mekoimo shel olam. So, but all that is not really addressing Atzmuso Yizbarach, God's essence. It's just his galus. It's the way he revealed himself unto us. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that, and we'll continue with it next week. B'ezras Hashem. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here with me.
Take good care. Thank you.
Good night.
Have a good night.